Paris Agreement on climate change has been hailed as a breakthrough in international climate negotiations, and yet the road to Paris was rocky, leading the international community from the disappointment of the Kyoto Protocol to the failure of negotiations in Copenhagen and then back to success in the French capital. The Paris Agreement is an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, in short UNFCCC. The UNFCCC was one of the main outcomes of the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro, also referred to as the Rio Earth Summit. It established a long-term objective to effectively address anthropogenic climate change and set out general principles in the governance structure, including annual conferences of the parties, or COPs, to the UNFCCC. The Kyoto Protocol, adopted in 1997 and in force since 2005, was the first major international treaty to the UNFCCC, specifying greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets for industrialized country parties. But without participation of the United States and without commitments from developing and newly industrialized countries such as China, India and Brazil, the Kyoto Protocol was unable to have the kind of serious impact on climate change mitigation that its proponents had hoped for. Unlike the more top-down Kyoto Protocol, the more bottom-up Paris Agreement grants country parties more flexibility in achieving emissions reductions through the so-called nationally determined contributions. It also ends the differentiation between developed and developing countries and spells out the need for a clear roadmap to provide sufficient amounts of climate finance. Future meetings and COPs will still have to decide a number of operational details, but the overall direction of travel is clear. It has been set with the agreement's core aim of keeping the rise in global average surface temperatures well below 2 degrees Celsius. The ambition is to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The willingness of the international community to support the Paris Agreement was evident in its fast-track ratification. In a historic development, the agreement came into force within just a year of its adoption, having passed the ratification threshold of 55 parties, accounting for 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions.